जिंदगी एक सफर है सुहाना, यहाँ कल क्या हो किसने जाना. I hope that's okay. When I got this opportunity to build my own biotech company, it was done with a sense of defiance and retaliation to show all the naysayers that a woman can succeed. And of course, while I was building Biocon, a lot of these thoughts came into my mind saying, hey, I'm a woman, so let me build a company where women can find job opportunities.
Yes.
When I look back on how I built the company, it was almost like today's startup.
Yes.
You know, starting in a garage, not just starting in a garage, but doing it in a very frugal way.
I want to come
so
back.
I always call myself, I think I was the first tech startup. I transformed Biocon from a very amateurish entrepreneurial company into a highly professional company. Everything just changed overnight for me and I welcomed it. 21 was the most important phase of this disease, this pandemic, because we were able to deploy vaccines at great scale. So I felt that the vaccines were certainly going to be a huge, huge comfort factor for the world. We are nowhere near wishing away this pandemic. So you can't think that you have got rid of COVID-19. Okay. You can never get rid of the flu, right? With the number of vaccines we have available to us, you can't say that you've wiped away COVID-19 altogether, but you've certainly muted its impact. This is going to be part of our lives. We will have to deal with anyone who's infected with COVID as a home remedy rather than rushing to a hospital.
So much, Kiran ma'am. This has been a journey to come on a recording with you. I have to tell you this.
Thank you, Anku.
So welcome to India Podcast and thank you for sparing your time to speak with our viewers and listeners. So taking from your journey, ma'am, we all have known you as, I think there's so many words and adjectives I had to use while defining your journey. It started in a garage. That's what something that clicked with me when I was reading about you. The first self-made women billionaire, or the first entrepreneur journey, successful woman from India Inc. woman, can I say that? Or today, as we see you as a philanthropist, we see you as a person who is the only one in biotechno world where I know has made the name so big. How do you identify yourself?
Well, first and foremost, as you know, I do first, identify myself as an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I have always, pursued this path of entrepreneurship with a sense of purpose, and I've always felt that I wanted to build a company that stood for something. Wow. And I felt that, my journey of over 4 decades has been very purpose-led. If you remember, when I first started Biocon, I was very keen that I build a company that was science-led, that was research-led, that provided great job opportunities for scientists, True. For women researchers, for women scientists, for women in general. And I wanted to reverse the brain drain. That was one of the things that I really was very keen on. Because I know, and I knew at that time when I was growing up, that, anyone who was a good student, who went to a good university, who got a good degree, used to only look for an overseas career opportunity.
Yes,
that's true. I just felt that was so wrong, because I said if India was going to educate its youth and lose that talent to the outside world, True. I'm sure that's not the way to build a nation.
Yes.
And I felt that we had to create those opportunities right here in India. And that was what really my sense of purpose was. Let me build a biotech company, because I was very excited with what biotechnology had to offer. I felt very proud that I was pioneering this effort,
Yes.
and that, I was willing to basically do everything it took to build a biotech company that would actually start providing these opportunities to scientists, to engineers, to researchers. And that's what my journey has been all about. Even today, I haven't strayed away from those very founding objectives.
Can you recall and tell us when you started off as a young woman, young girl, if I can say, what was in your mind? Because the vision and purpose you had, with the kind of vision, it's very rare. Having a visionary mind is something very rare. Did you know you'll come so far? Or today you are here, so you can just say that, it just
Oh,
realized.
I think that's a very good question, and I'll be very honest. Okay, I was, retaliating to disappointments and dejections in life at that stage.
Okay.
If you remember, I came back from Australia as India's first qualified brewmaster, and I was shown the door, basically saying, "You're a woman, this is not a woman's job. I don't think you will be able to manage a brewery, and therefore, I'm sorry, we can't give you a job." I mean, that was the response I had to being highly qualified. And I thought, oh, this is not good. And honestly, at that time, I had thought of looking for a job opportunity outside the country, because I said, this is no country for a woman, or for a woman who wants to build a career. So I was very disappointed. So when I got this opportunity to build my own biotech company, it was done with a sense of defiance and retaliation to show all the naysayers that a woman can succeed, that a woman can build a company. So, that was my initial kind of inspiration, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Because I was taking on a challenge, and I was inspired by taking on challenges of this sort.
True.
So that was the way I self motivated myself into starting Biocon. And of course, while I was building Biocon, a lot of these thoughts came into my mind saying, hey, I'm a woman, so let me build a company where women can find job opportunities.
Yes.
Hey, I'm a scientist. I want scientists to, be employed in a very meaningful way. So I think that was how gradually it kind of became a bigger sense of purpose.
Was it difficult to convince other women to get in line? Because we see this tendency of women only not having the confidence in themselves. And
Oh, interestingly, Anku, it wasn't so difficult, because interestingly, when I was building the company,
yes.
a lot of my women researchers and scientists joined me because they felt very excited about joining a woman-led company.
Yes.
So, when I look back on how I built the company, it was almost like today's startup,
Yes.
starting in a garage, not just starting in a garage, but doing it in a very frugal way, building it in a very resourceful way, getting young people to join me in my journey.
Yes. I want
Yeah,
to
so
come
I
back.
always call myself, I think I was the first tech startup.
Going ahead, talking about Biocon, how do you think, or why do you think there is so much gap in, or you could only hold on to the space organically even till today? You have a diversified portfolio, but your focus seems very clear and there. We will come about vaccines and all, but yet. So, how do you think it has worked?
No, I think there are many companies that have started up in the
Yes,
biotech space.
yes.
Okay. So I would not take away from that. And as you said, the vaccine industry is certainly a part of the biotech ecosystem, and they've done extremely well, but of course, from a very different perspective.
Yes.
But I would still say that if you just set aside vaccines, I do think that there are a number of very interesting biotech companies in the country. But I know how difficult it is to build a biotech company, both in terms of investment needs and in terms of the gestational timelines it takes to really build scale. Most people who have got into biotech build small companies. So today I know a large number of biotech companies, very smart companies, but because of the challenge of accessing capital, they've remained very small. Okay. Unfortunately, I, of course, built Biocon not through venture capital, but through debt financing,
Okay.
right? Because those days there was no venture
There
funding.
was no venture funding.
And I actually built my company for at least for the first 10 years through debt financing.
Wow.
And then I had a bonanza because Mr. Vagul of ICICI basically had just started a venture fund. And I was trying to scale up one of my technologies. And, you know, the debt financiers were giving me a hard time because they felt that I needed to give them far more guarantees and assurance than I could provide.
Wow.
And, you know, it was at that time that Mr. Vagul said to me, listen, forget about all that. I'm going to invest in you.
So he believed in you and your
He
vision.
believed in me and gave me my first break. And that was my first eureka moment, which said, oh, someone believes in my business.
Wow.
And someone is willing to invest in it and is saying, I'm not going to lend this money to you, I'm going to invest in you.
Wow.
That to me was my eureka moment, because up until then, it was always about getting a loan.
Yes, or paying them.
And worrying about the interest and the moratorium and all those aspects of debt financing. And this was the first time I felt that, oh, I'm getting this money as an investment, which I only have to pay back in performance.
Yes.
You know, so I think that was a great realization that I had in 1989 when ICICI Ventures invested in my business.
More like a startup story of yours.
Yeah, and that also coincided with the time when my own partnership with the Irish company Biocon was undergoing a huge change.
Okay.
Where the Irish partners had sold their entire business to Unilever.
Oh.
And suddenly, before I knew it, Unilever was becoming my partners instead of that small entrepreneurial Irish company. And what was interesting for me at that stage was that here I was, you know, building a new technology, which was being venture funded for the first time by ICICI Ventures. And then on the other hand, I was also taking on this huge change in partnership from a small entrepreneurial Irish
to a mammoth brand,
to a mega conglomerate like Unilever. Yes. And what was interesting for me at that time was, after I got into this new relationship with Unilever, Unilever actually told me that, by the way, the most valuable part of our Biocon acquisition is your IP in India, your technology in India. So we have to buy out ICICI Ventures.
What are you saying?
So they said, this is a very important technology that you have developed.
Wow.
And this is going to be very important for us. So, you know, we need to buy them out. So, you know, ICICI Ventures did very well, because in less than a year of investing in us, they had a 4-fold return.
Wow.
So that's what Unilever did for me. They made me realize the value of what I was doing in a very short time. They made me realize what IP was all about, because I had no clue about IP, you know, as such. And these were the ones who taught me how to file patents and how to, value these patents in a certain way. And in a very short time, I transformed Biocon from a very amateurish entrepreneurial company into a highly professional company, thanks to Unilever, because I had to then suddenly conform to all their standards, right? Whether it was, the kind of governance standards that they expected, whether it was the reporting standards that I had to align with. Everything just changed overnight for me, and I welcomed it, because I was that entrepreneur who was like a sponge saying, hey.
Listening to your story, I feel like, I don't know, I can't even say it's a luck. I think it was you who was destined to be given that kind of trust, and you turned it around. I think it was eureka moment for them rather than you. They must be thinking, we really found a diamond there to invest in, and look where we have come a long way. So it's a great.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I think it was a win-win from both sides.
Coming to certain, because we had put out many questions from people to reach out their questions they had for you. People have quite questioned on the current situation we are going through. Omicron and the new variant, Delta Omicron. How do you help people to understand where are we going? Are we going into endemic, pandemic, say? Where do we see ourselves in the journey of COVID or pandemic?
So let me step back a bit and look at the journey through this pandemic over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I think in the first 1 year, we were basically panicking. We had no idea what was happening. We didn't know how to manage the pandemic. We had never seen this kind of virus before,
Yes.
and the kind of disease it was. And so we started basically, throwing everything at it, right? But fortunately, there were also very strong efforts of developing vaccines.
Yes.
And of course, therapies to combat some of the adverse events of the virus. And I think we started learning quite fast in terms of how to manage the disease. So yes, the first 3 months were awful because you saw what happened in Italy. We saw what happened in many parts of the world where people were just dying from contracting the virus, and we just didn't know how to handle it. But within a few months, we realized that there was a way to manage some of these adverse events.
True.
Many drugs were helping with combating this virus. But fortunately, we were also developing vaccines at warp speed.
Yeah.
And the effort was global. So whilst India was also part of that effort.
Yes.
And I was really very glad that India also was such an important part of that effort, because both Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech played a major role in developing those vaccines, which actually then we were able to deploy and help us.
True.
So I think for that 1 year, 2020 was a terrible time. I mean, I remember I also got COVID.
In the first COVID phase.
First wave. But, I didn't have such a bad, case of the disease. I had a moderate disease, which I was able to treat at home. I didn't even go into hospital. But even during that, the time that I contracted the virus, I was being very scientific about it. So I kept measuring every parameter every day to know how this virus was working. And, so and as I, sort of tested myself and sort of diagnosed myself, I felt more and more confident that I knew how to get over this COVID. Then came the vaccines. And I think 21 was the most important phase of this disease, this pandemic, because we were able to deploy vaccines at great scale. And we know that what we were not prepared for were all these variants that were going to dodge the vaccine, right? So initially, of course, India was beginning to vaccinate its population, and suddenly we were hit by the Delta wave, which again caused a lot of devastation. Because I think we got away in some way, curiously, lightly in the first wave.
Okay.
What the reason was, I will never know, but maybe our immunity was good against the earlier variants.
Okay.
But in the second wave, the Delta variant was a very, very strong variant, which seemed to have really knocked us. And that was the time when we had the maximum loss of lives.
Yes, young lives.
And the maximum number of cases that we had, tracked. And that was a time which was very, very serious.
True.
And I remember that was also a time when we had started deploying vaccines. And for some reason, I felt that, okay, since I was fortunate enough to have received the vaccines by April, I felt that I was far more protected than those who hadn't received the vaccines. So I felt that the vaccines were certainly going to be a huge, huge comfort factor for the world.
Yes.
And it has been a big comforting factor, because despite the Omicron virus, which has now come and ravaged the whole world in terms of infections, I think we can also say with a lot of data that it hasn't had the same devastating effect as the Delta variant. And the reason I say that is because whatever said and done, at least in a country like India, we are not seeing the kind of serious cases in hospitals, and neither is the world seeing very severe cases in COVID. While the hospitals are being challenged, the ICUs and ventilator beds are not, being
It's not
filled
gone
up
to a fatal
at that
situation.
level. So I think we should take some confidence and comfort in that data. Having said that, we are nowhere near wishing away this pandemic.
Okay.
And why do I say it will become an endemic? Because you're going to keep having newer and newer variants. So you can't think that you have got rid of COVID-19.
Okay.
You can never get rid of the flu, right? You can't get rid of H1N1. You can't get rid of any of these coronaviruses. They're there. It's in nature. The only thing you can do is to find a way of it not having this impact on you.
Okay.
And that's why I feel that we are in a much better place with the number of vaccines we have available to us, and the way we are now going to boost this immunity against this particular virus.
True.
Hopefully it is an annual boost, because
Okay.
I really don't favor a quarterly boost or a 6-monthly boost. It's not healthy, I
Okay.
feel.
Okay.
I feel we should go in for an annual boost, which I think should protect us from severe disease. That is my personal belief, because I believe that you cannot completely rule out infections, but you can certainly rule out the severity of the infections.
So you think we are going into a stage where the severity will decrease with whatever variant we expect might come by? Can we say
And that's
that?
the endemic phase I'm thinking of. Like, you can't say that you wiped away COVID-19 altogether, but you've certainly muted its impact.
We can stay with that thought for now, or
And
suddenly
you have to
we'll
live with it.
You
You have to start understanding that you'll have to live with the virus. You can't go on having lockdowns and curfews and and quarantines for the rest of your life. I mean, you will have to accept that this is going to be part of our lives. We will have to deal with anyone who's infected with COVID as a home remedy rather than rushing to a hospital. And let's get out of this. I mean, I don't blame us for being paranoid, because it has been a devastating pandemic, but it also keeps us vigilant, because God knows what the next pandemic will be, right? And therefore, we need to keep tracking viral infections very carefully and make sure that when we have these infections, that we quickly develop vaccines for it. And I'm glad that there are many vaccine platforms now, like the mRNA platform, like the subunit vaccine platforms, that can actually help us to develop vaccines very fast.
True. But congratulations on your tie-up with Serum Institute, Biocon Biologics, and Serum Institute for vaccines. And now that the perception about vaccines are changing, earlier it was people were quite skeptic. Now I think it's quite become an acceptable thing for everyone. How do you see this market emerging for you, that you are there in a strategic alliance? So how do you see it?
So the way I saw it in terms of the strategic alliance was that up until now, when we talked about global health, the focus was on non-communicable diseases, because we were seeing diabetes, cancer, hypertension, heart, so the heart disease, neurological diseases. All this was really the diseases that everyone wanted to invest in and manage and see what new drugs you could come up with, or how you could affordably treat many of these diseases which now needed biologic drugs. And as you know, biologics are very expensive.
Yes.
So we wanted to address this from the affordable access point of view. But we were only looking at non-communicable diseases because, as you rightly said, before this pandemic, vaccines were kind of optional. They were not life-saving medications or treatments, because everyone felt that, the life-saving treatments were really for non-communicable diseases.
True.
But the pandemic actually put the spotlight on the importance of vaccines, because now it was realized that even infectious diseases could be life-threatening.
Yes.
Actually, we've seen it in TB. We've seen it in many of these other some of these viral diseases, which can be life-threatening. But up until now, nobody really focused on it being a large problem.
Yes.
Today, we are seeing that, yes, it is a very large problem. And I can tell you that, for the foreseeable future, of course, COVID is going to be a viral disease that is going to need annual vaccinations.
Yes.
But apart from COVID, I think people will also start realizing that it's good to get a flu shot. It's good to get a pneumococcal vaccine. It's, in many parts of the world, it's good to get a malarial vaccine. It's good to get a dengue vaccine. It's good to get a chikungunya vaccine. Because all these viral diseases, whatever said and done, dengue has taken lives, right?
Yes.
And many of these viral diseases now can be addressed through vaccines. So I think global healthcare is going to undergo a big change.
So can we see you get into vaccines for disease like dengue and malaria soon?
Yeah, I think Serum Institute has already been working on this, and we will be working with them on many other vaccines.
Yeah.
So I am very confident that this will become a very new area for us, and there's a perfect partnership because we have good R&D skills, they have great manufacturing infrastructure,
Yes.
and they have got a very good knowledge of developing vaccines. So if we can combine these two aspects of the company's strengths, I think we can keep coming up with newer vaccines.
It is a
And
great
then, of
way
course,
to-
part of the a part of the approach to these kind of diseases is also antibody therapies,
Yes.
which also we are very good at. So I think
Yes.
between the two, I think we can come up with some very interesting
Totally. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to advisory from doctors, like we had in COVID wave 2. People say try remdesivir, then they say no, backtrack on remdesivir, go on favipiravir, and other issues coming around. How do you think that should be tackled in future as we track the variants?
Yeah, I agree with you that there's been a lot of mixed signals from various so-called expert groups.
Yes.
So one expert group will vouch for one thing, another expert group will vouch for something else, and then people get extremely confused.
Yes.
And I wish WHO could have done a better job, because WHO should be giving a very neutral, unbiased kind
Yes.
of, reportage of the pandemic. But unfortunately, it has not helped because it's remaining very neutral. It's not
True.
giving an opinion this way or that way. So, for instance, everybody has been made to feel that the only answer to this pandemic are mRNA vaccines, and everyone wants to go and rush off and get mRNA vaccines.
Yes.
And then there's enough data to show that, look, the other vaccines are just as good. Don't get worried.
Yes.
I think India also needs to do a lot of research. We have not bothered to, do a lot of valuable research on the huge amounts of data that we have collected.
True.
Yes, it is, extremely confusing to the individual citizens when they hear one expert group talking about certain bits of advice, another expert group giving a contrarian view. And it would have helped a lot if WHO could have been a neutral advisory of information. But I personally believe that India has a lot to offer to the world. For instance, if you think about it, 90% of our population has been vaccinated with Covishield vaccines.
Yes.
And we've also got a lot of data during this Omicron, wave, in terms of how many people have been, reinfected, how many people have been reinfected after 1 dose, 2 doses of vaccines, which vaccines, because we've had Covaxin and Covishield deployed in the country. After how long did they get reinfected, etc. And did they get severe disease, or was it moderate or mild? We've got all this data. Now we can actually share this data with the world, saying, by the way, we've had these 2 vaccines only. We haven't had mRNA vaccines, but we've done pretty well because our hospitalization is very low. ICUs and ventilator cases are very low. So we think that and if you can have data on the people who were actually in ICUs and ventilators, and see whether they were vaccinated or not, or whether they had, other comorbidities or not. You have a lot of data to research and to analyze.
True.
And with the kind of data analysis that we can do, don't you think we should be coming up with very, very well-informed broadcasts to citizens instead of blindly following what others are saying in other parts of the world? So that's where I feel we are failing ourselves by not doing enough analysis of our own data.
So focus on data would really help even people get the right advisories, and we'll have more power to convince WHO on that part. Now let us know Kiran little beyond her journey as an entrepreneur and startup duo. There's a fun game we have called a quick fire. So since I know you're a little politically inclined also, and you're into art also. So if I have to give you a chance to tell us in your first thought that comes through is, if you wake up in the morning to be any one politician of your choice, who would that be and why?
It's interesting. I really don't want to be a politician, because that's one kind of a career or whatever I was never fascinated with. I like politics, but I don't like to be a politician.
Wow.
And therefore, I actually started something called the Bangalore Political Action Committee, where we wanted to create the next generation politicians who focused on governance and good governance.
Wow.
I'm very interested in governance and what would be the right governance model in terms of even the political landscape. But I'm just simply not fascinated with being a politician. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question because I really don't want to be any of the politicians of today.
Second one is, if you wake up to be WHO head, what is the first thought you'll have in your head?
I think the WHO has to focus on data-driven information, on making sure that there is a good balance between data coming out of the developing world and developed world, and at the bottom of it, it is health equity. But when I talk about health equity, it is not about feeling sorry for the developing world. The developing world has a right to healthcare.
Yes.
And I think the developed world must understand that they are not entitled to be the only ones with good healthcare. That health equity question is forever at bay.
Okay.
And I think today we need to break down those barriers and those walls.
Because I know you're fond of art and you kind of blend it with science. So if given a chance to be today an artist, who would you choose to be in that space?
Again, I'll answer that question by saying I love art. I used to, in fact, paint in my younger days.
Wow.
But I mean, there's no one artist or a few artists that I only admire. Okay. I have actually invested in a museum called the Museum of Art and Photography, where we want to actually celebrate a lot of art from India. I think India has fabulous art, but we haven't really given its place, its rightful place, to be appreciated and celebrated. So whilst we've celebrated some of the contemporary artists of our times, I think we've forgotten about the great artists of the past and what they did for to really build the whole landscape and the foundation for Indian art. I think Indian art is really, really tremendous. And I think the young artists of today are beginning to understand what the artists of the past have done. I mean, of course, we have the great Jamini Roys and many, many other artists of his ilk, right? And what we need to make sure is that we understand what Indian art is all about, because we've been an ancient civilization. We've had great art forms, and we've had wonderful art over the ages.
True.
And that needs to be understood and celebrated. I mean, I can tell you, when I go to any of our heritage sites, right, like Hampi, like, any of the great temples that we're looking at in our country, you just marvel at the kind of talent that there was in the art world. I mean, whether you go to the Taj Mahal and Islamic architecture, or whether you go to Hampi and the Hoysala architecture, I mean, it's marvelous to know what kind of capabilities we had, artistic talent we had in this country over time, you know. And I think every one of us should actually carve out time to actually visit our heritage sites.
Wow. And what is the story behind the colors of life? I think you have a calendar, which is very rare, quite exemplifying a lot of art. Is there a story behind your interest in that? Because we just go.
Well, you know, every year we come out with a theme.
Yeah.
And I thought after the gloom and doom of the last 2 years, I think we need to bring color back into our lives.
Yes.
And because art is so colorful, I just
Yeah.
picked on paintings which depicted colors of life and colors of seasons and everything we could in terms of bringing color back into our lives. And, you know, of course, as I said, as an art lover, I love all forms of art. Of course, Indian
Yes.
art is something I'm beginning to understand and appreciate. But I've also been very fascinated with Western art.
True.
Obviously, the Renaissance and the you know, the Scottish contemporary art is because through my husband I've started understanding
Wow.
a lot of that. The Impressionist artists of our times, who were really wonderful artists, like Van Gogh and
Wow.
Matisse and many others. I love, you know, to look at different forms of art. I even have started looking at artists in Latin America. I've started looking at Japanese artists. So, you know, when you're fond of art, you can appreciate art forms all around the world.
Thank you so much for your time and most importantly, sharing your story. I think the part of story you shared with us, it's very rare. I haven't heard that in detail as I could hear today. So I'm very, very privileged for that. And before I let you go, we have a very small ritual, if you want to look at that. I don't know how you take it, but do you want to leave us with any favorite tune or a music of yours which you like to hum throughout?
I have lots of favorite songs
Yeah.
from you know, from
90s
either Hindi or
or
English or
English.
anything, or even classical. So um,
Something we haven't seen from Kiran for a while. I've never seen you in that mood ever. So
जिंदगी एक सफर है सुहाना, यहाँ कल क्या हो किसने जाना. I hope that's okay.
that is really sweet of you and a good thought and a positive note coming from you. I think that gives a message to everyone what we can look forward in future is a good time. Thank you so much for taking care of us through your research, through now coming to vaccination. We really look forward to great invention from Biocon. And thank you for encouraging us with your story, ma'am. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
a
you.
complete privilege.